What happened behind the locked doors of old Hollywood? Was it just fame and fortune or something far more dangerous? Hollywood didn't just create stars, it created myths that would stick in the minds of many. It sold perfection, carefully lit and beautifully dressed. A fantasy that feeds the world with stories of love, glory, and happily ever afters. But peel back the gold foil. 3 were dreams that started to rot. We are talking about the things that have already been surfacing on the Hill of Hollywood for many years. Those whispers in the dressing rooms and sudden disappearances out of the blue. But there were studio fixers who made scandals vanish with a phone call or a body. Warnings about contracts that felt more like chains and a new normal. And actors who smiled widely for the camera, then never woke up the next morning. For decades, these studios were gods, and they controlled who rose, who fell, and who was erased. They owned the narrative, and they made sure the truth stayed buried. Some secrets were destroyed while others survived. Barely. But a few still stay while their echoes bleed into the present of industry's shining face. And it all begins with one word, and that was control. You've heard of directors, producers, and agents. But in old Hollywood, the most powerful men weren't behind the camera, but they were behind the curtains. And they were called fixers. Every major studio had them. For example, MGM had Eddie Mannix and Howard Strickling. And their job was not to make hits, but to clean up the mess left behind by the stars who made them. For an actress who got pregnant out of wedlock, these fixers found a quiet doctor or a remote rest home where she could disappear for a few months. A leading man caught with another man in a time when that could destroy a career, these fixers arranged a fake romance with all the Hollywood shine. It was never love, but a lavender marriage, a lie. But the public never knew the difference. And when things got darker, so did the fixers. There were even rumors that Eddie Mannix had ties to the mob. He didn't just bury scandals, but he may have buried people. And such doubts strengthened after the death of Jean Harlow's husband, Paul Byrne. Paul Byrne was found dead from a gunshot, and the scene looked wrong, or maybe too neat. Before police could dig in, the studio swept through the house, and the official word came out as suicide. But many believe Mannix made sure the truth never saw daylight. Then there was George Reeves, yes, the TV's original Superman. When he was found dead in his home, gunshot to the head, some said it was suicide. Others whispered it was a hit, which was possibly linked to Mannix, whose wife had been with Reeves. Fixers like Mannix were not just problem solvers, they were Hollywood's cleaners. And their mission was always clear: protect the studio, at all costs. When fixers couldn't hide the problem, they buried it, and sometimes 6 feet deep. Hollywood's history is not just glitter and glory. It has dealt with bodies, with deaths that technically made sense, but never felt right. Take Thelma Todd, a smart, sharp-tongued comedy actress who rose in the 1930s. One morning, she was found dead in her car due to carbon monoxide poisoning. The car was in a garage owned by her ex-boyfriend's mother, and her ex had mob ties. Witnesses gave conflicting stories, and the bruises on her body didn't match with that peaceful sleep narrative. But the case was finally ruled as an accident, with literally no trial, and of course no suspect. And now, again, comes George Reeves, the original Superman. He was found dead in his bedroom with a gunshot to the head. Police called it suicide, but too fast. The gun had no fingerprints, and shell casings were scattered while bullet holes dotted the floor. It looked like a clear struggle followed by a cleanup. Yes, something staged, but the questions were brushed aside. Studios couldn't afford a scandal, and dead stars didn't sell movies. So when the story didn't fit the dream got rewritten. Another case was of Natalie Wood, who drowned under mysterious circumstances in 1981. She had bruises on her body when she died. She was last seen arguing with her husband, actor Robert Wagner. The boat's captain later changed his story, pointing to a cover-up. But by then, the story had already been wiped out. In Hollywood, the script always had to end clean, even when the truth didn't. Suspicious deaths became part of the landscape, and every time, the studios reacted the same way. Not like grieving families, but like corporations protecting an empire. Because in the end, they weren't guarding people. They were guarding the brand, which was the holy Hollywood. The bodies were not the only casualties. Some damage didn't leave bruises, but it left silence. The same fixers who covered up deaths also protected something even darker: It was the system of abuse behind the scenes. Back then, the so-called casting couch was a business model. Powerful men like producers, directors, and studio heads ran the town. If a young woman wanted a role, she had to cooperate. Louis B. Mayer at MGM was famous for discovering teenage girls and then exploiting them. Harry Cohn of Columbia Pictures had a couch in his office, and everyone knew what it was for. There were rumors that Daryl Zanuck at 20th Century Fox used to have scheduled afternoon meetings with young actresses who had anything to do with film. For every woman who got a break, there were dozens more who walked away silenced or blacklisted. The studios didn't have to say the word. All it took was a phone call, and suddenly those auditions dried up. And speaking out was never bravery, it was career suicide. Many actresses were locked into contracts with their lives controlled, their movements watched, and their public image scripted. If they spoke against the studio, they didn't just lose work, but they could be sued for breach of contract. Marilyn Monroe once said she was a pawn in a man's world, passed from one executive to another while she was being. Yes, the Dream Factory had a dark secret. It didn't just sell fantasies, but just fed on them. And when intimidation didn't work, the studios had another weapon, which was surveillance. Actors were not just working for the studios, but they were being watched by them. Every move, every night out, every phone call with the wrong person got recorded. Studios even hired private investigators to gather dirt, and they used it. MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, they all kept secret files locked away. If a star wanted more money or refused a role, these studios leaked an affair, a photo from the wrong club, or whispers that are strong enough to crush their career overnight. Judy Garland, again, was not just abused, she was followed. Her addictions, her breakdowns, everything was documented and used as pressure points to force her back on set, even when she could barely stand. These studios just created the scandal and then leaked it themselves. The message was loud and clear: we made you and we can unmake you. The surveillance wasn't just about blackmail, it was about control. Total control, even over a woman's body. Loretta Young became pregnant by Clark Gable, and that scandal was hidden. She vanished and gave birth in secret, then staged an adoption of her child. The truth stayed buried for decades. Next comes Judy Garland, just a teenager who was forced into abortions to keep her figure camera-ready. And what about her consent? Never a factor. Back then, pregnancies were problems, because for them, stars were not humans, they were just assets. And behind the glamour, real lives were quietly controlled, then repacked for the screen. After controlling their bodies, the studios went deeper into their minds. To keep stars shining, they were handed pills like candy. There were talks that Judy Garland was given amphetamines by MGM when she was just 16. By her 20s, she was addicted and emotionally dependent on them. Instead of help, the studio gave her more pills, and when she faltered, they just blamed her. When stars cracked under pressure, studios sent them to psychiatrists. And not for healing, but to silence the damage. Marilyn Monroe was tossed between doctors, drugged into submission as her mental health got worse. And no one asked what she needed. They only cared about what she could still perform. But the darkest case among all of them was Frances Farmer. She was bold and unwilling to play along. And for the same reason, she was locked away, drugged, and even beaten. Mental health was never a matter of concern in Hollywood. It was managed just like lighting or makeup. And when the stars were too broken to shine, they were left in the dark, while the cameras kept rolling. The pills, the pressure, and the silence all came with a cost. Some stars escaped with their sanity, but most of them didn't. Judy Garland died at 47, alone and addicted after a lifetime of being medicated and controlled. Marilyn Monroe's death was ruled an overdose, but the questions never stopped. Others didn't even get that far. Peg Entwistle, once a promising actress, couldn't find work, and in 1932, she climbed to the top of the Hollywood sign and jumped. And her suicide note read, "I'm afraid I'm a coward." Those scars remain, even now. Not everyone crumbled under the weight. Some stood up and paid the price. But in Hollywood, rebellion came with consequences. Bette Davis had had enough. She walked out on Warner Bros. And sued to break her contract. But she lost the case, but of course it lit a spark. The same goes with Maureen O'Hara. She refused to play along with the studio. When she pushed back, Luella Parsons, a Hollywood kingmaker, blacklisted her in the press. But O'Hara said, "I wasn't for sale." These weren't just actors. They were warning signs. And Hollywood made sure the price of truth was too high to pay. For those who dared to fight back, the studios had one more weapon, which was the press. Stars who spoke out weren't just silenced, they were publicly destroyed. And it was done by their allies, those gossip queens like Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons. In return for parties and favors, they wrote exactly what the studios wanted. If a star stepped out of line, the studio leaked a scandal, and the columnists lit the match. These headlines didn't just ruin reputations. They rewrote history. And once your name was fed to them, there was usually no redemption. These weren't just old Hollywood scandals. They were real lives, shattered and silenced. They called it the Golden Age. But behind the spotlight were pills, lies, silence, and bodies. For every name in lights, there's one that was buried and forgotten. And the real question is, how many secrets are still hiding behind the smile of a star? Let us know in the comments section. Also, remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to keep up with the content that we throw your way. Until next time.